guest tonight wants to go by her first name only. Amanda, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Amanda, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm a stay-at-home mom of 3 lovely children. I'm 29 years old. I am married. I do write books. Some have been published, poems and stuff. But really, I just like going outdoors, taking photos, and living the outdoor life.
Sounds like a good life to me. You told me in the pre-interview about a book you want to write about dogmen. What can you tell us about that book?
Well, honestly, it's not going to be about any encounters that people have had. It's going to be more of accurate research, if there actually is accurate research. I don't want to make it a hearsay book. I actually want to make it a true documentary of a wolfman, with footprints, if possible, accurate sightings, what they look like, exactly, not people just guessing, having to go back and remember what they look like, try to get verifiable proof of what they actually look like.
If I can help in any way, please do let me know, because I'd be glad to.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. One thing we've been talking about, we've had a couple of, I guess, what you could consider to be pre-interviews. One thing that's become pretty clear is how rattled you still are at this point as a result of having that encounter that you had that one night.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about what it's like to deal with having an encounter like that? Whether we're talking about maybe the week after you have that encounter compared to years later.
Well, honestly, Vic, till this day, I still keep my curtains completely closed at night. And I do not go outside by myself at nighttime unless I have to. Even then, I am very nervous. But I'm always wondering if there's somebody watching me. And not human either. So that's kind of the feeling that I still have to this day.
Yeah, life can be enough of a challenge without having to worry about things like that. When you're walking down the street at night, even if it's a person that's watching you with ill intent, that can be bad enough. But when you know things like dogmen are out there and you're worried about them coming into the picture, that just makes it that much worse. Before we got started with this interview, you told me about how uncomfortable these thoughts are making you, and that's totally understandable. Let's face the facts here. You're talking about something that happened to you that's the most traumatic thing that ever has happened to you, and it's got to be the most traumatic thing that ever will happen to you. And the fact that you actually are coming on the show and doing it with the intent of helping people by trying to put information out there that might shed light on this for people who have had encounters just like you, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. That says a lot about you.
Well, Vic, these things are out there. Half of the people believe it, half of them don't. Some of them have seen it, some of them haven't. And people need to know and actually pay attention to what dangers or what animals are actually in the woods. So that way, God forbid, should a little child be playing outside in a wooded area, and if something was to happen involving one of these dogmen, that would be very bad, especially when people don't even believe, which some people don't. A lot of bad things could happen from something like that, and people need to be aware.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. It really makes me nervous when I think about how many times people go out into the wilderness and have picnics, they camp, they hike, and have no clue what's around them. Who knows how many times they're being watched by dogmen that are just feet away, and they've got no clue about that. Having said that, let's dive right into the details of your encounter. Please give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay. Well, it was the fall of '99. It was maybe October or November. I was in 8th grade. It was real chilly that day. We lived up in the foothills in North Carolina. Some of you may know it, some of you may not. It's Stokes County, North Carolina. About 20 minutes from Virginia. Real wooded area, very dense, hill, rolling, hollows. When you actually talk about the wilderness, it's the wilderness. Got natural waterfalls and all kinds of things like that. My family, my grandparents, my mother and father, my uncle, we all lived on a family farm, basically. And it wasn't your normal farm with cows or chickens and stuff. We had goats and cats and other little things like that. It was real nice. Everything was real nice. It was calm. You didn't hear sirens or cars revving up and down the road. It was a really nice country life. Now, that being said, it is in the country. So, there was about 400 acres of land all around us that were wooded. Us having 10 acres of land in that particular area, we cleared, I would say, maybe 7 acres, and it was completely cleared off, flattened. My grandpa took the tractor through there. I took the four-wheeler. We pulled them trees out one by one, got them stumps up, and then everybody got their houses in there. So everything was flat, clear. The grass had finally grew back. It was green as it could be. It was beautiful. Well, keep in mind, obviously, there's 400 acres of wood, so there is a wood line, a very major wood line. My house and my uncle's house was at the very front of the road. I would say, imagine a triangle. That was the shape of the land, with my grandmother's house being at the very back. And my house and my uncle's house being at the very front. Basically, if you had a triangle, each house was on a point. My grandma's would be at the top. Mine and my uncle's would be at the bottom. So we were closest to the road. She could open her back door. She was probably about 100 feet from the wood line. Now, every day after school, I would go down there with my grandpa and just chill. My parents worked in High Point, which is about 60 miles from where we lived, so they never got home till late. And I would always go down there and eat dinner, and I walked down there. It was probably about the length of a football field is probably how far there was in between our houses, so we wasn't on top of each other. We actually all had a really big yard. And I'd walk down there all the time, day, night, and nothing ever bothered me. Well, this one week, I walked down there, like normal, but I got to feeling kind of strange, I remember, this one week. I'd sit at the table, it just felt like somebody kept staring at me. But there was nobody ever there. Nobody was looking at me. And I figured, well, maybe my sisters are up at our house staring at the window, trying to see if they can see me or something. Maybe that's what it is. But nobody ever done anything. So one night, my parents were already home, and I went down to my grandma's. And I was sitting there talking to my grandpa, and I kept noticing there was a shadow running kind of, if it's nighttime, and you have a big light outside, and it's shining kind of on your house. When somebody walks up under it, you can kind of see movement in the light, so you can kind of tell that somebody or a dog or something is near the light. I kept seeing that type of image, but, we have goats, dogs, cats. I figured it was just that, nothing out of the ordinary. I finished my supper, decided I was going to go home. So I walked out the door, and as soon as I walked out the door, I opened it up, and my grandma always had a bell on the chain to her door. She said so it was so she could hear people come in the door, which obviously there was no problem because it was very loud. And even though that bell was in my ear, and that was in my right ear. And on my left ear, I could hear this massive running and rustling in the leaves, like something or somebody was running through the leaves. And it sounded like it was a bear, because you can tell when something is small or something is heavy versus a squirrel versus a dog running in the woods. You can tell the difference of the sounds. And I walked out probably about 5 feet, and I still heard it. It's like it was run, stop, get quiet, and run a little bit again, rustle around, and I'm like, nope. So I went back in. I got scared. I didn't know what it was. Didn't have no idea. Thought maybe it was a bobcat, because we had bobcats up there. There's probably as many bobcats as there was house cats. And went back in the house, told my grandpa. He's like, there's nothing out there. Which me, I was kind of always a shaky person. I mean, I always walked in the dark. My parents and my sisters would hide behind buildings, jump out and scare the crap out of me. Instead of running forward, I would always jump 3 or 4 feet straight up in the air, which didn't do me no good if I was being attacked, and jump straight up instead of run. So I was always nervous because of them doing that to me. But I knew that it wasn't them out in the woods running around like that. That was just too much for it to be them. So like I said, I went back in, was telling my grandpa. He knew how it was. He knew what they were doing, and he's like, you know what? You want to go home? I'll walk out on the porch, watch you walk up, which he did that for me every now and then. I don't know if it was because I was nervous sometimes or if he just was watching over me to make sure something didn't happen. He did that a lot, actually, now that I think about it. I was a little nervous, so I sat down, and I stayed there for about another 30 minutes. Of course, it got later. It was already dark. It was October, November, so it was already getting dark at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. And this time it was about 8:30, 9 o'clock, so it was pitch black. I decided I was just going to go home again. So I told him, and he was like, okay, well, let's go. He always kept a shotgun in I guess it was a gun shelf type of rack. You see a lot of older people that have their gun in a rack that's on the wall, and he always kept it above the door. I never understood why, but I'm glad he did. I guess that's the best place to have it if you need it when you walk outside. You know, I opened the door and stood in the house for probably about 2 minutes to listen and see if I heard the rustling in the leaves again, because it wasn't that far from the house at all. I mean, it was not far. And my grandparents had a deck on the side of their house. I would always go out the side door. And their deck was probably, it was a really big deck. And the reason I tell you about this deck, you'll find out in a minute, but the deck was probably, I would say, about 20 feet wide and about 30 feet long. It was a really big deck, and we haven't yet put the guardrails up on it. You know, every deck now you have to have some type of railing on it. Well, we were still building it, so there wasn't no railings on it. It was just a perfect little deck with no railings and some steps off the side of the house. So I proceeded to walk off the side of the house, down the stairs, and I was walking through the driveway, which obviously was right there next to the steps. And I probably got, let's say I probably got 5, 10 feet in front of their house, away from the deck. All of a sudden, there was this gut-wrenching, god-awful growl, roar. I don't really know how to explain it. It was just horrific, loud. If you've ever heard kids bumping their radios going down the road, and if you're right there, you feel the vibration vibrate in your guts and your heart and lungs and everything in your chest, you could actually feel that type of vibration in your chest, in your body. and it was just like, ugh, when it let out this horrific, I don't know if it was a growl or a roar. I have no idea what it was. Right at the same moment, it was kind of like right in the same moment, you hear the growl. My grandpa hollers, run! And, his gun is right there above the door, which I said I never knew why, but it's good that he did. I looked back, I didn't see nothing, and I just took off running, and my grandpa started shooting, and I didn't know what he was shooting at. Didn't know what it was. Didn't know if it was a bear, a dog, but I was running to the house. We had a sliding glass door, and I was running so fast, which honestly, if anything wanted me, it probably could have got me. But I was running so fast, I didn't even open the glass door, actually run into it. So I was in a hurry, but sometimes when you're in a hurry, you're in too much of a hurry, so you actually end up taking more time to do something if you wasn't in the hurry. It was one of them moments I was having, trying to get in the door. And I run straight into the house, didn't say nothing to nobody, run straight back to my room, opened my door, sat in my closet, and did not come out until the next morning when it was daylight. We didn't have a phone. There was no way I could call my grandpa to see if he was okay, to ask him what it was, just to even check on him. I had no idea what was going on, what was going to happen. I didn't tell my parents. Obviously, there was something out there that was pretty big, obviously scary, because just the roar of it scared the hell out of me. And I could not find out nothing until 7 o'clock the next morning. That was the longest night of my life I have ever had. And I seriously doubt I'll ever have a night like that again, which I hope I don't. But the next morning, my mom always left at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And I was really nervous because I stayed up all night. I could not sleep. I was worried that whatever that was would come to my house. We had a sliding glass door. Obviously, something, bears, or they have no problem breaking windows, so I'm sure whatever that was wouldn't have a problem. I didn't know if maybe it picked my scent up and maybe was going to follow me, and that worried me the most. That was the most troubled thought I had, that it picked my scent up and that it might be looking for me. So I sat in my closet. I heard my mother leave. She had one of them loud trucks, so I heard her leave. And I did open my door, and when I say I didn't come out all night, I didn't, but I actually came out probably 2 or 3 times to use the restroom. But I guarantee you nobody saw me come out. It was quick. But, yeah, I waited until she left. I did open the door and look and see what time it was, and it was 6 o'clock. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, just 1 hour to go. Well, it was time for school, so I was in my closet. So I just got dressed in my closet. And I actually went to school that day, which was very weird. I remember now I went to school that day, and I was very nervous, thinking, what had happened. But the school was only like a mile down the road from my house. And the weirdest thing was, I remember leaving school early. I guess you could say I skipped class. But I had a good reason. That was a really good reason. I didn't tell anybody where I was going. And obviously it's a rural community. So I started walking down the road away from the school. And then I got to thinking to myself, I'm walking home. And this is all wooded area. And I'm walking home. What am I doing? And then I remember telling myself, well, it's daylight. If it's a bear or something, I can see it. But luckily, somebody ended up picking me up. It was one of my friend's dads or something. I told him I was sick. I wanted to go home. So luckily that happened. Well, I told them just to drop me off at the house, and they did. So I went in, threw my stuff down. I remember staring at my grandparents' house. And I didn't see anything. I figured if something would have happened, there would have been cops, which I listened for the night before. I didn't hear anything. I decided I was going to go down there. I was really nervous about going down there. You just don't never know. So many things was crossing in my head. I didn't know if something had got him, drug him back in the house, still was in the house. You just don't ever know. So I walked down there. It was the longest walk of my life, too. And I remember the blinds were open. I was trying to look in when I got closer. I seen my grandma walking around, acting like she was all normal and stuff. So I was like, okay, great. So I walked in. She said, hey. My grandpa was sitting in his chair, and he looked at me, and when he looked at me, he had the biggest eyes. I've never seen his eyes look the way they did. And we just locked eyes. We knew what we were getting ready to talk about. And he got up. He didn't even let me finish sitting down. He got up and motioned for me to come outside. And it had been raining a couple of days before that. And in our yard, there was all grass except for right around the porch where we had just built. Obviously, we had to dig a bunch of holes to put the footings in. And it was all red mud, too. So it was really muddy. He took me out to the porch, and he showed me some footprints. Now, these footprints were really odd. I've never seen any footprints, and I'm not a footprint expert either. But these footprints looked very weird, and I've Googled them in my older years and actually found some that resembled it, but I didn't take a picture. I should have. It was back in the day before cell phones become popular and the cameras weren't cheap. They were still using the 35 millimeter cameras that were like $100 with the film roll. So I didn't get a picture. I didn't get a cast, which I don't think I could have with it being muddy on the porch, because the footprints were actually across the porch, like it had jumped up on the porch, but just at the very corner of the porch. It was a square porch, and it's kind of like it was, I guess you could say it was in the front yard, and it just kind of skidded across the edge of the porch. And I think there was like 3 to 5 footprints. I'm not really sure now. It's been that long ago. But that's how I say when I guess it just kind of strided over the edge of the porch right quick, that it didn't. It wasn't just walking. And they were very odd. There's a type of shoe, and I've actually got a couple. They're high heels that actually have a heel all the way down on them. Probably maybe 2 or 3 inches wide. Well, women would know this, how they're fat in the front and very skinny in the middle and the back. If I could explain it, it would seem right, but it's hard for me to explain. But I have come to terms with somehow it looks somewhat kind of like them shoes, but with claws, I guess, which I couldn't really tell how many claws. Obviously, it wasn't perfect. It was just a big clunk of mud that you can make up. But what was really distinctive to me on the footprints, it looks like all the weight was on the front. Like, I guess if you're kind of tiptoeing to your kitchen, you know how you're walking on the tip of your foot and you're putting the weight on the, I wish I knew the name of it. I should have Googled the name of that part of the foot. But it's the part right after the toes, that particular part. But all the weight was right there and on the toes, not closer to the claws, but right in that area of the foot. That's where it looked like most of the weight was. So I was curious to how that particular animal was walking. And my grandpa was even talking about, when we were looking at it, he was talking about the weight distribution and how it could have made it. And I looked up and asked him, did you see it? At first he didn't answer me, like I said. And then he just kind of was standing there. And I could tell by the way he was looking that he did, but he didn't really want to answer me. And I wasn't sure at first if it was because he was scared, he didn't believe it, he wasn't sure what it was he seen. I didn't know what was going through his head, honestly. I didn't ask. He just sit there and shook his head for a minute. I'm like, well, what was it? Was it a bear? And he's like, that's not a bear print. And I'm like, well, what kind of print is that? And he's like, it looked like a werewolf. And he just looked at me. And we stared at the prints. Not being into Dogman. Actually, at that time, I had never heard of Dogman. You know, I had watched a couple werewolf movies. I think at that time, American Werewolf in Paris had come out or something. I'm not really sure. You know, I had seen that. I don't think I had heard of Dogman or anything. Finally, I asked him again, and he calmly said, but he calmly said it, but it was in a way that he wasn't sure, and he didn't want to really say it, but he was like, it looked like a werewolf. I took a step back. I was like, a werewolf? Never heard of a werewolf running around. And like, we should have took a picture. I have no idea why we didn't take a picture. I know I didn't have a camera, but I'm sure my grandma did. I don't know why we didn't take a picture. I remember my grandpa sticking his foot up to it, and it was probably the size of his foot. You know, it wasn't nowhere near as fat as his foot was. Well, he had big boots on, and not cowboy boots, kind of like a steel-toe workman's boots, so they're real, you know, they're probably like 4 inches wide or something, or 5 or 6 inches wide. I'm not really sure on that. You know, he wore a size 12 at the time, and the footprint was not as big as his boot. And when I say big, I mean, if he was to step next to the print, his shoe would take up a lot more space, but I didn't see the animal. I just heard it. And if I had to put a face with what I seen, as some people would say, there are things better left unsaid. There's things probably better left unseen also. Because that's probably how bad it would be. I've never seen the man scared before. The man was scared. And he really believed, till the day he died, that he seen a werewolf. And I would be willing to bet my paycheck that he did. I was there. I didn't see it. If I did see it, I didn't realize I seen it because it was dark. There was a big light up in the sky. But at nighttime with them big lights, you can actually be looking at stuff and not even see it because of the shadows and this, that, and other. So if I did see it, I didn't realize that I did. And I guess I'm kind of glad that I didn't. But, I mean, just this little experience has shaken me up to the point that I am. You can imagine how I would be if I actually saw it. The bad thing about the incident was we had goats, and we bred them, sold them. My grandpa neutered them, which was very odd, but he did. And we actually had 2 goats out on that night of the incident that we were going to sell the next day. I mean, it takes a little while to catch these little suckers. They were very friendly. You could pet them. But when they knew that you were going to get them out, they would run from you. And we had them in about an acre lot fence, so they had plenty of room to run. And there was the males that had the horns, the billy goats, and they would run into you and knock you down, and it was just a big hassle trying to get these goats out. So we got them out the night before, and honestly, during the whole ruckus that particular night, I didn't even think about the goats. And then I remembered when I was standing there looking at them footprints, I was like, where's the goats at? And he just looked at me like, yeah, you don't want to see them. And we walked around to the other side of the house. My grandpa had got one off of the chain. He was still working on the other one. The odd thing about the other one was it was pulled so tight. And I don't understand this, but the chain was pulled so tight into the woods, it looked like it broke its neck or suffocated it from its collar. And it was just weird because I would think something that sounded like that would have the strength to break a chain, but keep in mind this was an old man who had chains that was made back in the 1800s, and I'm not kidding when I say these chains weighed probably 100 pounds. So you can imagine how strong they would be, but I just don't understand why the chain didn't break, or maybe it didn't try to break it. I guess it was just eating dinner right there. But the other goat was completely gone. I mean, it was gone. There was nothing there. You seen a little bit of hair from, I guess, the goat ripped off of it or something, but it was completely gone. And that poor little goat, it was ripped all to pieces. His belly was ate out. His tongue was gone. It was horrible, and I felt so bad for it. And the other goats seemed very nervous. You can kind of tell when your animals are nervous around you. There was another goat out in the front yard, and he was still there. And he seemed very nervous. So I don't know if it was still in the area or still hanging around the house, but it had a perfect area to be in. I mean, there was hollows as soon as you walked in the wood line, you would walk directly into the beginning of a hollow. And what scares me the most is I used to walk back there all the time by myself, and I actually had a path. And these type of woods, I know it's kind of weird to think this, but these particular type of woods, they actually had natural paths cleared out. It didn't have a lot of underbrush. It was more trees and stuff. So there wasn't a lot of game trails made because you didn't need them, because you could just run freely through this area. It was very thick. I mean, it was very thick. You could probably be in a helicopter looking down and you wouldn't be able to see through the trees to the ground. But when you were on the ground, you could run freely because there was no underbrush. It was all canopy, which I guess it would make it ideal. Now, as far as down in the hollows, that was a totally different story right there. That wasn't nothing but rolled sticks and grass and the big old burrow-looking things, and some of it kind of looked like an embankment with a giant hole. Now that I think about it, something could have lived in it, but I don't know what. I used to walk back there all the time. Never thought of anything sounding like that. And I've never seen one. I have Googled them recently, but I don't know what's real and what's not real. But I don't think I would want to go back out there after hearing that. And honestly, if it wanted to kill me, it could have killed me, because I don't run that fast. I might have thought I was running fast, but I wasn't. And the fact that I got stuck with the door probably about 30 seconds, it could have had me. And, I had to run probably, obviously, the distance was about a football field. So I got kind of tired, so I was not running fast the whole time. And yeah, I did glance behind me once or twice to make sure nothing was chasing me, and nothing was, but I didn't know that. You know, it could have been jumping around on the top of houses or buildings or whatever. I didn't know. I was worried. I know this might sound crazy, but they say bears have the best smell in the world, and my closet was actually on an outside wall, and if it wanted to, it could probably just stuff its hands right through the vinyl side and grab me. That did cross my mind. I was having a bunch of crazy thoughts that night. Some that might not make sense to other people, but that's just how unnerving that situation was for me at that particular time. It's still very scary. I mean, obviously, when I'm in my zone and somebody knocks on the door or even walks by the window, like if the kids are outside and I'm just in my own little zone and I see something walk by, I'm jumpy. I'm just really jumpy now.
After what you went through that night, I don't think anyone could blame you for being jumpy and having a hard time dealing with it. In movies like Jaws, for a long period of the film, they never did show the shark. And because of that, a lot of people say that made the movie even more unnerving. Sometimes when you don't see what's coming after you, it can be a little more unnerving than seeing what's coming after you. I wonder if it would have gone better for you as far as dealing with this encounter if you would have seen the dog man. I honestly am glad that you didn't, but I still wonder if that would have changed anything. But having said that, Amanda, let's talk about these after effects that you've had to deal with. What's been the worst aspect of trying to get over that encounter?
Really not having anybody to talk to about it. And I would have my days where I would think about it and it would make me uneasy. My husband, I guess he can, obviously when you're with somebody and you see the change in their mood and the way they look, you can notice if something's wrong or if something's not wrong. And him asking me what is wrong, and not that I can't tell him, but I feel like I would I'm not saying that he would laugh at me. I would just, a lot of people don't believe in stuff like that. So for me to go up and say, hey, I walked out the door and I guess I got chased by a werewolf, people probably not going to believe it. That's the worst part. Just not being able to talk to anybody about it.
It is kind of like a prison without walls. You've got this traumatic experience that you're trying to get over, but not having anyone to talk to about it with, that just makes it that much worse. So I feel your pain on that. I'm so glad that you found out about the show and consequently found out about me. That's about the best thing that you can say about all this.
I am too, and I really do appreciate it. And one thing that I did do, I did step out on a limb when I did this, and I pulled myself back in for that particular reason. But what happened was after I talked to you the first time on a pre-interview, I was like, well, I'm going to talk to somebody else about this. So I actually went to see a counselor. She's one of them people who specialize in depression and post-traumatic stress and anxiety type counselors, which is probably what I needed. She asked me what had happened to make me feel this way, and I told her. And if her eyebrow could have killed, it would have killed me. You should have seen how high that eyebrow went looking at me. She thought I was crazy. She tried to make me believe that that is not what I saw, which obviously I didn't see it. My grandpa seen it, but I heard it. She tried to make me believe that that is not what he seen, that it had to be a bear. And I'm like, bears don't have prints like that. I Googled a bear print, And a bear is not going to sound like that. I heard a bear. It doesn't sound like that. It wasn't a bear. Nobody's going to talk me out of it. I know what it was, and nobody's going to tell me differently.
Oh, I could only imagine. After having done this for a while, it's amazing how many different scenarios I've been exposed to where eyewitnesses will share about their experience trying to get over something like this encounter they had, and they'll tell me about this happened and that happened. Well, if it's of any comfort, I know how misery loves company. If it's of any comfort, there was another eyewitness who, after speaking with me, spoke to a psychologist in his area. Unfortunately, after the eyewitness had been telling the psychologist about his encounter for a few moments, this psychologist stopped him in his tracks and said, "I'm sorry, but you need to see a different type of psychologist." And basically, this psychologist was referring him to someone who specialized in psychosis. He was convinced that this eyewitness was crazy because he was sitting there and had the nerve to talk about seeing this quote-unquote dog-man creature that he had seen. So, yeah, you're not the only person who's been through that, Amanda. It's unfortunate when you reach out for help and you get treated that way, but like I said, misery loves company, and unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, you're not the only person who's been through that.
I'm sure doctors think that it's just a waste of their time, but if they would actually take the time and do some research, you know, as I was talking about, I was doing research in my book, for my book to make it accurate. What intrigued me the most was, you know, at first when the incident happened, I wasn't sure, but my grandpa had no reason to lie to me. He had no reason at all to lie to me. I couldn't explain the print. I couldn't explain the roar, growl, whatever that was. I don't know what that was, honestly. I don't know if it was you're in the way of my food, or I'm going to eat you too, or I don't know. But it probably wasn't I'm going to eat you, because it didn't ever eat me. In my research, there was a legend of a werewolf in a certain town. Honestly, I can't remember the name of it right now. But what intrigued me the most was the government ended up buying that land where there were so many Wolfman sightings and made it a protected sanctuary for animals. Now, why would the government, and I checked into the land and everything, it was worthless. It had no value. It had no copper, silver, gold. It didn't have nothing. It was just basically wooded, rolling hill area that was no use to anybody. It was landlocked and everything, and they put up a giant fence to keep people out of the area. So why would the government waste all that money and buy up that big area for protection for wildlife?
As hard as it is to understand, that's been done before. I had a guest on the show not long ago. He mentioned an area in Ohio where there were a lot of sightings of dogmen, and consequently this area was purchased, if I remember correctly, by a police department in that area. There have been other instances where a certain area's got a lot of dogman sightings, or maybe a lot of Sasquatch sightings, and that area, that land will get bought up by the government, and next thing you know, it's off limits. So that situation you just mentioned, it's not isolated. That's happened before.
That intrigues me the most. Doing my research, I've run across a lot of stuff. Real believers, researchers sending request forms to the CIA, the FBI, and they get back some type of thing. We don't have any documents called Wolfman, Werewolf, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, but yet they buy up all this land, and actually, well, since you said Ohio, obviously that's like the fourth place now that I've learned that has done that, which is very strange to me. But it is what it is. Obviously, they're not going to tell us everything. I think if people can't believe other people, then they should do some research and check out particular things before they rule somebody's being crazy. Obviously, that person is not crazy. He's seen something, whether it was a wolf man or not, whether mine was a wolf man or not. There was something there that was not a known creature.
After you had that encounter, when you were walking around the property or walking around the area, did you ever have anything strange happen to you that might have pointed towards it being around again, other than the fact that you mentioned that the goats were acting strange for some time after the encounter?
Well, I did notice, and I didn't notice it before the encounter, but the second day after the encounter, I noticed that the woods were dead silent. I know it was a little chilly, but honestly, it wasn't normal that the woods were that quiet. I mean, usually you would hear squirrels rustling around in the leaves or something going on, but it was just an eerie, dead feeling, like everything was scared or dead and gone. Everything was just gone. Any type of wildlife that was there, and there was plenty squirrels, chipmunks, birds. You can hear birds chirping all the time. Everybody says birds migrate south, but sometimes we got some weird birds because there's plenty of them that stay here and start chirping at 12 o'clock at night. They got their days and nights mixed up, I guess. But everything was dead silent. And I stood there for probably a good 5 minutes and was just examining stuff, looking around to see if maybe there was any dead bodies of little animals. I never found any. I never found any signs of fighting or anything. I looked for any indication of anything being through the area that I was in, and there didn't look like nothing had kicked up the leaves, which hearing that roar, I figured me walking on leaves, I'm not going to really disturb the ground. You're not really going to be able to tell with me just slowly walking through there. Now, if I was running, like running for my life or running and kicking at the leaves and stuff, yeah, you would be able to tell I've been through there, but you couldn't tell the way that I was walking. And I figured something that sounded like that would disturb some type of area, but I never seen anything disturbed, which I thought was very odd, because there used to be animals, even bobcats. You know, you could tell when a bobcat had been in the area through feces and what they ate and the sounds and all that, but everything was gone, which was really creepy.
Yeah, it sounds like it must have been awfully creepy. Well, it's about time to wrap this show up, Amanda. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
I would just like to say to people to be aware of your surroundings, especially when you are out doing a family event, whether it's camping, kayaking, canoeing, hiking. You know, just be aware of your surroundings, because you never know. We hear about a couple people getting attacked, but you don't really hear about people being killed. And honestly, I think it's because when somebody gets killed, they're probably the only person there, so nobody really knows and just assumes it's a bear. But that's my own personal opinion. But I just say be careful. You never know what's going to happen. Obviously, it's a wild animal. You don't know what it's going to do. And just try to watch out, especially for your children. And just mainly be aware of what's out there. And that's really all I got to say about that.
Doing this interview has not been easy for you. I know that, and I appreciate that. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you were still willing to come on the show, share the details of your encounter, trying to help people. That means a lot. And like I said, thanks again so much for doing that.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again so much for being here. You have yourself a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you. Episode 74. Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host as we listen to eyewitness encounters involving one of the most terrifying cryptids, dogmen. Our guest tonight is George Lucas Weiss. George, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great having you here. Please give us a brief bio on yourself.
My name is George. I'm originally from Brazil. I'm 31 years old, and I'm living here in Maryland for 3 years now.
That had to be one heck of a culture shock. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, but it's been great.
Well, that's good news then. George, you told me in the pre-interview about all the legends that persist around Brazil about werewolves. Do you think the legends really are talking about encounters people have had with dogmen? What's your take on that?
Possibly, but it's hard to really tell because of how religion is tied up with legends in Brazil. It's one of the most Catholic countries out there. It's basically around 80% of the population is Catholic, so a bunch of legends. At my part, I truly believe that if there's a creature out there, there's way too many eyewitnesses and evidence to not believe in that.
You know what they say, where there's smoke, there's usually fire. With all the legends that you were telling me about that are coming from that area, it sure does make you wonder. As far as the legends go, there are various names that you're telling me about various kinds of werewolves that are supposed to have lived in that area and to this day supposedly still do. The first one that comes to mind I was hoping you could tell us about is, I think it's pronounced the Luisal?
Yes, that was he's a kind of a native of the Indians. They're called the Guarani. Most of our legends that we have today come from them. The native word that was lost with time, it is more of a wrong way to say the Spanish word for wolfman, which is lobizón, or in Portuguese we say lobisomem. That legend is more like this is sort of a god, of an entity, supposed to be something more like of the Green Reaper. Is a creature that lives in cemeteries. They say that it's the seventh son, the male. If you have seventh son is they're all male. The seventh son will turn into a Louison. And there's a creature that lives in cemeteries, a creature that eats rotten meat, roadkill, and stuff like that. And one of the features, and it stinks. One of the things. That's basically the legend that the natives have. As far as it goes as to how it looks, it's not like the description of the Wolfman. It's more like that werewolf in the Harry Potter movies, or like skinny, sick-looking creature like that.
You said it was, for the most part, hairless, but are almost all these werewolves, or all of these werewolves, supposed to go around bipedally, or do some of these go around on all fours, supposedly?
Most of them go around on all fours, but they do stand up and they walk around with two legs. And most of the descriptions, they have really long legs. The front paws are really long. They run is a weird, not like a dog will run naturally.
Most reports of dogmen, they do report the arms being longer than the legs when they're seen on all fours. That gives them kind of a slope back appearance, so that does fit. Of all these werewolves you were going over and talking about the characteristics of each one, there's one in particular you're telling me about called, I think it's pronounced, the Gritador. Could you tell us about that one? Because I'm sure the listeners will understand why, at least in my opinion, that seems like the creepiest one.
Oh yeah, the Gritador basically means the screamer or the howler. The legend goes, especially down where I'm come from, the South Brazil, have a lot of canyons, really high mountains and canyons. People say that if you're camping outside, if you go hiking in the middle of the night, you will hear this terrible scream, like a woman scream right in the middle of the night, and this like reverberates in the canyons. Supposedly, you should not answer back. If you answer back, the creature will come and then you go missing. Bad things happen.
Phew. I'll tell you what, if I'm ever camping and I hear something like that, that's going to be the first thing I think back on. And trust me when I tell you, I'm not going to answer back. That wouldn't be good.
Yeah, and those places up there are really desolate. There's not many people living there. So, yeah, if you're camping out there and it starts screaming, yeah, I'm not answering.
As far as the Gritador goes, I definitely got the impression that it supposedly has different characteristics than the other types of alleged werewolves that you mentioned. As far as other werewolf legends, like I think you said it's pronounced the Sado, do they have different characteristics? What's the story on them?
One of the legends we have, the werewolf, is that, like I said, the Louison is more the indigenous part, but that part of the sons persists in most of our legends. So it says that the seventh son of a family, the seven men, will turn into a werewolf. And when it turns, it's interesting that it's not really on the full moon. It's more like on a new moon, they say. And the person has to run either 7 churches in the city, or run around the city on the 7 corners, or run through 7 cemeteries, graveyards in the city. And that's called a fado, which means in English more like a burden. It's like a cursed person, in air quotes, have to perform every night as she transforms. And it's always like a pack of dogs running around it, because it says that dogs really don't like this creature.
It'd be easy to pass all these legends off as being tall tales, but considering the fact that you had your own encounter, when you think about the details of that encounter, sure makes it pretty hard to think of it that way. Having said all that, let's get right into the details of your encounter. Actually, you know what? Before you do tell us about what happened to you, can you give us an idea of what the layout is like in that area where you had that encounter?
The city I was in is the capital of our state. The whole city kind of sits in a bowl, so there's mountains all around it, and we have a big lake that is on the other side of the city. And where I was living is right on the foot of one of those mountains. The forest back in Brazil is not like here. Around this time of year, you can see far into the forest. You see there's only the trees. They don't have any brush on the ground. But there, a really thick forest. You really can't go through the woods there without a machete. I used to live like right up against the mountain. Back up the house and going up the mountain, there's a bunch of woods, and if you go over that mountain to the other side, it turns into fields, and those fields go all the way. If you kept going, they'll end up in Uruguay.
So it sounds like if anything like that lived right there in that region, it would have plenty of room to roam then.
Yeah, there's open fields and hills up and down with really not many people living there because one of the main economies of the state used to be cattle. There was a bunch of cattle roaming free, and so there's a bunch of fields and places to hide.
If the jungle there is that thick, anything could be back in there and you wouldn't even know it. It could be just feet inside the line there and never be seen. So that I'm clear, you said you lived right at the base of the mountain. Does that mean that you were living right pretty much at the edge of where the trees stand? Or are you maybe some distance away from that tree line? Or I should say more accurately, were you?
The house, it was, I would say, 200 meters up that road. That road is straight up the mountain. So if you go up that road, once it ends, it's all jungle up there. The mountain is all jungle.
So you lived next to the road. You'd have to go about 200 yards or so up that road before you got to the tree line, and then that road would cut through all the forest and jungle then.
That jungle is because you really can't see anything there. If there's anything hiding there, it'll be looking at you and you never know.
Oh, I can only imagine. Have you heard about many people in that area just turning up missing then, or what's the story on that?
There was a local legend. This guy was a werewolf because he used to live way up in the mountain, deep in that forest, by himself. And there was always that he was a werewolf, and I heard somebody that saw actually what they described as a werewolf down the same road that I was living in, way down the road a few years back.
If you did go missing, or if you went into the jungle there and something had ill intent on you, it'd be so easy to get taken out. Well, let's get into the details of this encounter you had, George. Please give us every last detail about it that comes to mind.
All right. So this was beginning of winter, so it was June or July back in Brazil. And our property there, we had my house, there was a small path down, and there's my grandfather's house. There's the whole family had houses on the property. And the whole property was around, I don't know, 3 or 4 football fields. If you go all the way down there, there was a street, and there's the other street going right in front of my house. They two meet all the way down there. This was around 3 a.m. It was just me and my brother at home. My mom had gone down to take care of my grandmother. She was sick. My brother was sleeping in his room, which is in the back of the house. I was in the living room watching movies, and I heard all the way down there in the village, the dogs went crazy. I didn't think much of it because there's a lot of stray dogs out there. Sometimes when the female is not ready to reproduce, she goes around and there's like 20 dogs just following her everywhere, barking and everything. But you could clearly hear that the sound was coming my direction, like there was something walking in the street, and the dog, as it passed in front of the houses, the dogs were trying to attack it. So a few minutes later, I heard somebody walking in the path between the both houses, and at first I thought it was someone that was trying to break into the house. That was unfortunately wasn't that difficult to happen. And my first reaction was stop and listen, because it was bipedal. It was somebody walking in 2 feet. Outside is hard-packed earth, but there's a little bit of gravel on top of it. So you can clearly hear anyone walking anywhere around the house. So I could hear those steps coming up the path on the side of the house and stopping right in front of the door. Because our house, there was two doors. There was a door in the living room, and I was sitting facing the door, and then looking to my right, there was the kitchen door. The house was set on the slope, so the right side of the house where the kitchen is and the living room, where the bedroom where my brother was living, stood high up on the ground. Like my brother's bedroom window, it was much higher than me. I'm 6'2", and the kitchen door was high on the ground too. So if I'm standing outside down there, the kitchen door, the bottom of the kitchen door is the same height as my head. So we have a little land right outside the kitchen door and a few steps going down. So what I thought was a person at the time stopped right in front of the door. I was paying attention already because of that, but all of a sudden there was this growl outside the door, and it was loud. I was looking to YouTube, trying to find anything that come close, and as much as I can explain, it sounded like a wolf, angry wolf. It didn't bark anything. I can say it wasn't no dog, because the sound was coming from the height of the door. I could tell the sound was coming higher from the ground. Like it had to be taller than me. The sound was coming like in the middle of the door, so I'm 6'2". That thing had to be 7 foot at least. And the ground was thick. It's like I said, it sounded like a wolf mixed with the deep growl of a lion right in the back of the throat. And it didn't bark once. It was just doing like a wolf does, like. And he woke up my brother. He was sleeping in the back room, and he woke up with that. And at that time, I was standing up in the living room, and I don't know what thing. I had no idea what it was. I was 100% sure that wasn't a dog. It was just standing there. It kept growling. It kept growling. And at one point, I could tell he turned the head towards the door because of the way the sound was coming. It get loud. I'm sure they was looking to a door. The door at the time was just a thin metal door. If that thing wanted to go in, it could have ripped the door like paper to go in. At this point, I had a knife with me in the living room. I don't remember why I didn't have a knife, but at this point, I have a knife in my hand. And I'm just standing there, sweating. I could have gone to the bathroom window and look outside to see what it was. But I think at the time I was too scared to move and go check what it was. Because the house, it's around 7 meters width. So I was in the living room one side, and the kitchen door is on the other side. So this thing was around, I don't know, 8.5, 9 meters away from me, outside. At this point, there was no dogs barking. It was quiet. There was only the sound of this thing. That took like a minute, just growling loud and deep. All of a sudden, you can hear stepping outside. I heard somebody explaining, like when a person walks, you can hear the heel, and then the whole foot goes down like. And this was not. It was just like one, like a paw stepping on the ground. And I'm sure this thing was heavy, and it sounds like somebody with boots was just stomping on the floor. After those moments, the thing just took off running, and it ran down the rest of the path and outside in that road that goes right in front of my house, and went down to meet with the other road that was coming before. And all the dogs started to barking again in that direction where the thing was going down. So I could hear dogs barking as the thing went all the way down that street until all the way there's a main road up there. And I went to my father's bedroom, and he was stiff in bed. He was awake. I asked him, "Did you hear that?" He said, "Yeah." That woke me up. But the growl was so loud, it woke him up in his bedroom, which is in the back of the house. That was that.
Ew. Let me guess, you didn't get any sleep that night.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I can't say I'll blame you.
We were alone in the house, so no.
I can't see how you could have gotten any sleep after something like that. How close are your neighbors' houses? Or you don't live there anymore. How close were your neighbors' houses to you?
My grandmother's house is just outside. The path is between my house and their house. So the path from what I was, like I said, the thing must have been like 9 meters away from me. The other house, it's down like 50 meters down between one house and the other. So there's a good path between them two.
So it sounds like the neighbors' houses weren't exactly right up against yours, but they weren't all that far away.
No, there's a good path between them.
If they were still that close, the next day, did you ever find out if any of those neighbors heard that growl that night?
Not really, because they lived in the house was kind of divided in two, and they lived in the other side of the house, and there was no one up there in that part of the house. But I did went outside the other day to check for prints, but like I said, it's hard packed dirt, so you really couldn't see anything unless it was raining or something.
Did anyone else in that area report any encounter or activity from something that might have been what was standing outside that door that night? For as far as you know, are you the only person who had an encounter with it?
Yeah, because I wasn't really, never really did talk with much with the neighbors, because our property was kind of big, so the next neighbor was down there. We never talked much. The only other encounter that I can remember, it was many years back when I was around 15. Some friends that was telling me that somebody they knew was walking down the same road that goes right in front of my house, that ends up in the woods, and that road is a dirt road. I mean, it used to be a dirt road. It goes all the way down to the main road up there. It's like maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles down that road to the main road there. And then at that time, there was no lights on that road. One side of the road was kind of a marsh, and the other side was woods. There was a creek going down there. And what they described is like there was this big black dog standing in the middle of the road. They were going down the road at night. They freaked out and ran away, and the thing just went into the woods and disappeared. But at that region, that's the only thing that I know about it.
That story you just told made another question pop into my head. With these legends of these werewolves in that area, do they ever mention a color that they normally are, or do the colors run the gamut?
Actually, all the legends that you can find, mostly they're black.
They're mostly black.
Yeah, most of the legends you can find are black.
Most dogmen are reported as being black.
We have that video on YouTube. I don't know how credible that is. There's one video that was filmed back there in Brazil, where there's a supposedly dogman back in somebody's backyard, and they left a camera rolling, and you can clearly see there's a black kind of creature moving around all fours on the backyard.
You know what? I saw that when that first was released. It's pretty freaky looking. If you saw that, if you looked out a window, or even worse, if you were outside and ran into something like that, it would be a guaranteed Charmin moment, because that thing just doesn't look right. It doesn't look like a prototypical dogman, although dogmen have so many different looks, but I can't recall ever hearing about a dogman looking like that. It looks more like some kind of a man-wolf to me, but who knows what's going on with that thing. If you haven't checked it out, I'll see if I can't dig up a link to that video and post it on YouTube. I can't guarantee that I'll find a link to it, so no promises on that. Before this encounter happened to you, George, what was your take on all these legends? Did you look at them as being made up, or did you look at them as maybe having some truth to them?
I can say there was half skeptical, because I always believed in Bigfoot. I know that there's many things out there that we don't know about it. With so many witnesses and a bunch of footprints and stuff like that they have, and many of those people that come forth and tell their story, they have nothing to gain. You know, there's people that will end up being ridiculed because of that. So, you know, I don't see what the reason for somebody to do that. So it's got to be some truth to that.
Well, that goes back to the whole where there's smoke, there's normally fire idea. Something that you told me about in the pre-interview that kind of caught me by surprise is the fact that you said over there news stations cover alleged werewolf attacks with a uncommon regularity. What can you tell us about that?
This is more in the North Brazil. There's many small cities that we don't have that many big cities up there, small rural communities, and almost all those communities have small TV stations, radio stations. It's fairly common to come across, especially on YouTube, if you're looking for werewolves in Brazil or something like that, you come across videos of they going to people's houses. There's one that I can recall right now. There was this werewolf or a dogman running around the city for a couple of nights. And people were actually freaking out. They went to the TV. They went out for it was actually a witch hunt out there. The people were just with flashlights and things like that running around at night trying to find this thing. And a bunch of stories like that. You know, people walking around at night and just this thing just run by across the street, this black thing. The TV stations that they do report, radio stations, TV stations.
About 2-3 months ago, there was this long-legged looking werewolf subject that was on a YouTube video. It was all over the place. It was all over Facebook. Is that the supposed werewolf that was running around in the town at night that you were just talking about?
The one that I was talking about just a few years ago, I know what you're talking about. I saw that picture. The problem with that is that every time that they would show up in Facebook or somebody would post it, it was supposed to be in a different city. But it was reported in a TV show, in the news, that there was somebody, I think, was in their window, and they heard the noise of the dogs barking, and then they took a picture of it. It's like a cream color werewolf creature walking around in 2 legs, a tail, right in front of a post lamp in the street.
The first time I saw that, I had a good stare. I wasn't sure what in the world to make of it. It sure doesn't look like any dog man I've ever seen. I guess who knows, really?
Yeah, that looks like like I said, the only big canid that we have in Brazil, the main wolf, which is actually not a wolf at all. It's more related to, I think, foxes or something like that. And they just have that color, and it has really long legs. The creature it's kind of weird creature, but it's the only big canid that we have back in Brazil.
You described it to me in the pre-interview. You said that it had really long legs, almost like a deer, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I was watching a video, and the lady was describing this thing to have a head of a fox and the legs of a deer and kind of a body of a wolf. It's got it is called the maned wolf because he got like a mane. It runs across its back and connects to this bushy tail in the back. It's always cream colored, and the paws are black.
Doesn't sound like anything I'd want to run into out in the bush, but I guess once I have a look at it, I'll have a better idea on that. In the pre-interview, George, you were telling me about how your grandmother and a friend's grandfather would tell you about werewolves, stories about them. Can you share any of those stories with us?
My grandma, she was part native, so she used to make natural medicine for people and things like that. She was there's people go to there for that, and she had a bunch of supernatural stories, ghosts and stuff like that. And one of my favorites always was this about a werewolf that she encountered. When she was a young girl, she used to live and work in this family's house. As she was telling me, the man in the house had a really weird behavior. Full moon night or something like that, he would just go out and didn't come back until morning or something like that. And she was aware of the legend, and she was concerned. So one night, it was full moon, the guy went out, and she was cooking. And the house was made of, it's all planks of wood, so it had this big gaps between the wood, so you could see outside. And she was cooking there, and she heard the dogs barking and things like that, and she heard the howl outside. So she picked through the woods in the house, and she saw a red eye looking at her. Well, she said she poked it with whatever she had in her hand. She poked it in the eye, and this thing went crazy and then ran, and the dog was running after it. And after that day, she packed up her stuff and she left the house.
Yeah, I can't say I'll blame her for leaving the house when you see something like that.
Yeah, and my friend's grandfather, she was telling me this, that he had twin brother, and they were about, I think, 22 years old, so it was quite some time ago. And they used to live on, again, a rural community, and they went to a party at night, and they had horses. So they had to go over this bridge. So when they went, everything was fine. They went, and there was late at night. They were coming back. As they go and get close to the bridge, the horses just stop, and they don't want to go over the bridge. No way. So they jump out of the horses and try to pull the horses to go through the over the bridge. And the horses just took off. They didn't want to go over the bridge. No way. So they had nothing to do. They had to walk home. As they tried to cross the bridge, this huge black dog with red eyes just walked from under the bridge in front of them. And I don't think he saw them, but he went down the path, and they kind of followed for a bit. And then when he turned around, they saw the red eyes. They ran. And I think she was telling me that this happened more than once on that spot, that bridge. Another thing that my grandmother used to say is where she lived in a mountain. There was this road that goes through this small neighborhood down there up the mountain. And there was this point in the road. There's this huge tree, let's say. The tree is still there. And there was a creature that would stand there at night. And people would try to go through that spot, and this creature would just stand behind the tree and like peeking around the tree and growling and kind of not letting people go through, and people just turn around and go back. This is two things that she told me. I've been through that spot several times. It's like there is a big tree. It's like I think it is a pine tree. It's a really wide tree. You can hide behind the tree, no problem.
Ooh, if that's true, sounds like a good area to stay away from to me.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't go up there at night.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a good place to hang out, that's for sure. From your area, the Mapinguari, I think it's pronounced, is that supposed to be a dog man, or if not, what's it supposed to be?
That is another legend from the Guarani Indians. That's actually way up there in the Amazon forest. Most of the legends and creatures of the natives is nature spirit. It's supposed to be a big hairy man, much more like the Bigfoot type creature. It's like really much taller than the man. It's really strong, and it got no neck on it. It supposedly has its mouth on its chest. And the most impressive thing about it, the smell. It said there's things you can smell that thing in the forest when it's coming from very far away.
If it's supposedly got a mouth on its chest, that's a pretty tall order there, but oh well. Well, it's about time to wrap the show up, George. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Yeah, if you have any encounters with the dog man, Rick's here, you can talk to him. Don't go look at these things. I haven't seen it. I just heard it. For what I heard, really close to me, I didn't want to come across and actually see it. That's why I never went and looked out of the window, because once you've seen it, you can't unseen that.
Isn't that the truth? I know you were curious that night, but I'm so glad fear kept you from looking out that window. If you would have looked out that window and seen one of these things, I'm sure your life would be a lot different now than it currently is, so thank goodness for that. Thanks again so much for coming on the show tonight, George. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Have yourself a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you.